Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of the Creative Crafters podcast hosted by Bette Makes. And my guest today is Andrea Haglund with myverycraftylife.com. Now, Andrea absolutely loves helping others and loves the crafts they are interested in pursuing. So those two really tied together. She's written a book on dye sublimation, which is an amazing topic. Crafter called A Crafty Guide to Sublimation. Excellent book, something you really need to get. She designs, teaches, and creates herself, and she always tries to bring the resources to the table she wished she had had when she started and was getting going with her crafting journey. So I just want to welcome you, Andrea. And even though that's a short introduction, if you can just tell the listeners a little bit more about who you are and about your company.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today. So a little about me. I am currently in Richmond, Virginia, but I have moved all over the world, which is kind of fun. And I have a puppy. Her name is Mocha. She's a little bit over 1-year-old mini Bernedoodle, and she pops up in my videos and posts and even crafting all the time. So that's been super fun. She will actually become my full-time service dog as she is a little more able and a little bit calmer. Right now, she's a little extra happy. She loves to greet people, and she needs to not do that as much. So that'll be fun to have her with me full-time. As far as crafting, I have been in the crafting world for many years. I actually had a jewelry business for several years and then sold that. And eventually kind of got into just making things with cutting machines and all of that kind of stuff. I literally made myself like 3 t-shirts. I've had 7 ankle surgeries, and I think moving on to like my 3rd or 4th one, and I just wanted something like motivational and happy. So I created those shirts and I wore them to physical therapy a couple of weeks later. And my physical therapist and one of the patients was like, "Oh, can you make me some?" And I was like, "Sure, why not?" And then it kind of spiraled from there. Like it didn't start intentionally as a business. And so I started with cutting machine and doing that and designing. I also used to design like wedding invitations and save the dates and that kind of thing. And then it just kind of spiraled. And now I do and teach dye sublimation as my primary thing. I also do laser cutting things. And I love combining sublimation with laser cutting. I think that's like the coolest thing right now. And definitely allows you to make some super, super unique things that you can't find anywhere else. And as you talked about, I wrote a book, actually the first book that had come out on dye sublimation, A Crafty Guide to Sublimation. There's now a 2nd edition where I added things like designing and some other stuff about colors and printers and as things have changed. And that book really, for me, it started as like, I was just going to do like a digital download, like a PDF type of thing to answer people's questions. And when I really got into it, it really was a book. Like it's 100 pages, chock full of content. So I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud of how much it has helped people sort out all of the linguistics and the vocabulary and there's so much over information and even wrong information out there. So I definitely direct people to that to say, hey, this is like well researched and well used and utilized by people. So that was really exciting to put out and then revise and do a 2nd edition. And I really think it's for crafters by a crafter. And I think that really helps. So many people in the dye sublimation industry are, like big producers of awards and all of these other things. And they don't necessarily understand where we're coming from when we are like, what do you mean it should be light pressure? And they get a little confused. So I've really taken it from that perspective and from my own perspective of all the help I wish I had to just not be confused at the beginning.
Yeah, and that's a real important part is, sublimation is a whole new world for a lot of people. And you had taught us in our previous summit just some of the beginning techniques, which I've tried, and they're just absolutely fabulous. It just made it so easy. I didn't have to go out and buy a new printer with tanks or anything else. I could use my infusible inks. I could use other types of stuff. So I know you're passionate about sublimation, but if you can just give us a few hints on, where you started with sublimation and how you got there and why you're so passionate about it.
So for me, how I got there is, so I started my business, just with those couple of shirts and not really meaning to. But what ended up happening was I got some corporate customers. I was doing vinyl on their windows when they got a new business, or doing their shirts via transfers and that sort of thing. And they said, hey, we'd really like to use you for more. Can you look at, here's the kind of things we want. We want awards, and we want mugs, and we want these very personalized things with our brand. Can you do them? And the more I looked into it, sublimation was just the right fit for that. It gave me the most options in terms of, a lot of these people had very elaborate and bright brands. So it doesn't work in a lot of other formats where, they're so detailed with so many different colors. They really didn't think about how to transfer that to usage outside of print. And sublimation kind of gave them and me that option. So I actually started with an Epson conversion on a printer that's no longer made. And I was in the middle of doing 5 cases of mugs, and my printer just died. And it was not a happy moment. I was pushing to get done before another surgery and ship them out. And basically I just called up Gandhi and I said, hey, I need a printer. I need it tomorrow. Can you get it here? And they worked with me. And then I moved to using a Sawgrass. Not that I totally recommend that anymore, but it's been great for me. And so I did mugs and I did awards, and now I've been combining it with my laser to do different cool things like ornaments and retirement gifts, and a whole bunch of different options that I couldn't do before. And I'm really passionate about teaching sublimation because I think there's so much wrong information and bad information and clickbait out there that I think it's important for people to have a trusted source, but also to have condensed information. We don't all need every bit of information at once, and it can get super overwhelming. And I wanted to remove that overwhelm. And the way I got into teaching was simply, I was making videos on my Facebook page to show my customers how things worked. So it wasn't about teaching or anything like that. I didn't even think about that at the time. And the people who I was getting comments from were the actual crafters. Oh, that looks really cool. Could I try that? I have a heat press. Can I do that? What's a way to do that I don't have to buy a super expensive printer? All of these things. And so I just sort of by default, again, ended up teaching. And with that, I was going on bed rest after procedure. That doesn't matter, but basically I was like, okay, I'm going to write this download that I can put on my website, and it's not going to be this big thing. Well, what it turned into was this whole book. And now what I'm passionate about is just making sure people understand what they can do, especially at the beginning, that's not investing a lot of money. Especially right now, everything is so expensive. Everything's hard to get. Everything, we all need to be pinching our pennies. So I do like to come, especially to these summits, and I always enjoy your summit, and present another option that's not just spending a lot of money. We were kind of talking about this beforehand, but to give people the option to try it out and see if it's for them, because there is limitations with sublimation that a lot of people don't like to talk about, and they kind of skirt around it with like clickbait titles and stuff. And that's not really the way I operate as a person or as a business. I like to give, good, well-researched, well-known information that is clear what you can and can't do, what your limitations are, what are the cool, unique things you can do that you can't do another way. So that's been really important to me, because I do get a little steamed when I see things that are just blatantly false or harmful. We're heating things to 400 degrees with sublimation, and that produces off-gassing, whether it's from the item or the ink. And there's harmful things that can come from that people don't understand or kind of hide behind. And I just don't want to see anybody get hurt or disappointed after spending lots of time, money, and energy.
Yeah, that's a really important part of it. And then, of course, coming into the craft, of course, you've got to have some inspiration of things you want to make. So where do you grab your inspiration from?
Oh man, I definitely grab it from just about everywhere. Lately, it has definitely been my puppy. She has become, I was at a retreat and we needed to do artist trading cards. So I made them. I made them on my laser and then sublimated them, and they were of her face. And so I also am obsessed with coffee. I'm an espresso coffee drinker, so not like drip coffee. And so a lot of my designs have end up being like coffee, tea, that kind of thing. And I'm pretty like kind of biting, sarcastic. I like some of that kind of stuff too. So I do that, and kind of I have this joke with a friend that it's like dogs because people suck. And crafting because people suck. Like I have a whole line of files that is that, just because it's funny and it makes people laugh. And it's not. I rarely kind of cross that line, but and if I do, don't worry, it would be hidden. But I do like those like funny, sarcastic things. So anything kind of dog, coffee, crafting, sarcasm, I kind of fall into that little bubble. I also really, really love craft organizing. Actually, a lot of my blog is about that. And I love, like, I did professional organizing for a little while and I loved it. I love like rearranging things and everything. So I get a lot of amusement out of that too. So
That's incredible. I know the listeners can't see this, but I can see your organization behind you with all your vinyl rolls in behind, and it's just amazing. They're all color grouped, and there's
yeah.
so organized little drawers in behind you, and it's just fabulous. Now, I'm going to ask you a question about, what's the most challenging aspect of what you're doing? What do you find the biggest challenge for you right now?
Well, my house is on the market, so my biggest current challenge is being in an office and not making a mess. As we know, like project making, I don't care if it's printing and pressing or vinyl or laser, makes a mess. And I can't really do that. But outside of that, I would say like business wise, it's definitely getting seen on social media and making those connections with people. The algorithms change, the expectations change, the apps change. So to keep up with all of that is really challenging for me right now, just with everything else going on in my life, like moving. And as far as like creatively, I think it's not getting stuck in a rut and like having that creative mojo and finding ways, like when you kind of hit that wall, either from burnout or exhaustion or just lack of inspiration, like coming out of that and still finding ways to be creative and bring that to the crafting community.
Yeah, it's that time balance that's really the toughest. But there's obviously some rewarding aspects to all of this. So you can let us in on what do you feel? What is the biggest reward that you get out of doing what you're doing?
So for me, I absolutely love when someone reaches out to me and says, I created this with your file or with the knowledge I got from your book. Like you took the overwhelm or the design I had in my mind and I created it now. I've been able to do this because you helped me. And I'm a big proponent of helping others and giving and all of that. And so teaching has been just an extension of that to me. And the book has been an extension of that. You know, I really enjoy watching other people do things easily because I made it accessible for them, or using my designs to create something really cool and interesting and fun. Because I don't know about you, but one of the most rewarding things is seeing someone else having done either something you wouldn't have thought of or put it on something you wouldn't have thought of with a design and being like, oh, people really like what I'm creating and they want to use it and they want to share it with others.
That is fantastic. So just a couple more questions. One of them is, I would like you to give our listeners sort of the tip of the day, something about sublimation that they absolutely need to know before they give it a try.
So the biggest thing you need to understand, it's maybe a couple of parts here, but sublimation is a chemical. It is not an ink. We call it an ink, but it is actually a chemical being put on that paper. And there's an actual chemical process, the dye sublimation process, that happens when you heat it. And so it's going from essentially a liquid to a gas to a solid. And people don't really understand that there's like an actual chemical process happening. And the key to understand, I don't know if you can hear my puppy barking, but she's going a little crazy for some reason. But people need to understand that has its inherent risk, but it's also a really cool thing. So like what you get on your page may not look what the final process is. And because your ink is going to do that transformation process and change and warp into these colors that we meant for it to happen. And I think kind of the science gets left behind in the crafting world with that, but understanding that and understanding there are some inherent risks like off-gassing, but that it's a really cool thing. Like you're essentially doing a little science experiment every time that you create something. And I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty awesome.
That is fantastic. So, Andrea, how can people be in connection with you or talk to you or, any way of communicating other than myverycraftylife.com? You mentioned a couple other social media channels. We would love to know what those are.
Yes. So I am actually on most of them. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Lemonade. Oh, I'm probably forgetting one, but most of them, my handle is at My Very Crafty Life. I kept it pretty simple, so you can find me on literally any of those that way.
That is fantastic. So just one last thing. This is Andrea Haglund, myverycraftylife.com. And thank you, Andrea, for being a part of our podcast. We look forward to seeing you at the next summit.
Well, thank you for having me. It was great to be here.